friends, and welcome to my World of Final Fantasy review. Before we get this party started, that was another weird accent, just a few housekeeping things. The first one being is that I have not finished World of Final Fantasy yet. I'm about 30 hours in, and because of where I am in the story, I suspect I'm on the final stretch of events. When I look into the character codex, it looks like I've discovered about 65 to 70% of all the characters, so that kind of makes sense. But just know that going in, that what I'm going to talk about obviously reflects upon my experience thus far. This is a Final Fantasy game, so I could there could be some things I haven't experienced yet, and obviously I won't be able to speak on those. So just know that going in, this is just my 30 hours of time spent with it that I'm going to talk about. Yes. World of Final Fantasy follows twins named Rain and Lon on a quest to discover themselves and their past. And I'm going to leave it at that because I like to leave things spoiler free. And may or may not be because even though I am 30 hours into this bad boy, I'm still kind of trying to grasp what the heck is going on. That's not a bad thing. There is definitely a story here. I just haven't really uncovered the meat and potatoes yet, if you will. But I'll just leave it at that. So while this is called World of Final Fantasy, one has to ask themselves how much like a Final Fantasy game is this, especially with Final Fantasy 15 around the corner. Has Square Enix really developed a whole new Final Fantasy game? And so I want to talk about that a bit. So the World of Final Fantasy has Gil, it has familiar enemies, it has familiar towns, like diehard fans of the series, if you've played all of the games, you're going to see a lot of throwbacks. It has action time bar, but the combat is a whole nother pickle that I'll wait to get into that. There's a lot of fun Easter eggs. So in that regard, yes, the world is filled with Final Fantasy references. When I think of Final Fantasy, I think of sprawling towns and huge dungeons and exploration. So with that said, World of Final Fantasy is kind of like a light version of that. So for instance, a lot of the maps are very linear with branching paths, and more often than not, you will find a treasure chest at the end of said path. The towns are, and this is kind of a thing, so the towns of this Final Fantasy game are basically for display. I mean, I don't even know if I've come across a town yet where I can actually go into a door and explore someone's house or talk to random people. I mean, there are NPCs wandering in the town, but it's not like you can go into any of the buildings or anything. In fact, you cannot buy items in town. You have a home base where you can go to almost whenever you please, and that's where you can buy your items and whatnot. There's no weapon and armor for your characters to equip. That's because the combat of World of Final Fantasy has been completely overhauled, and that's again a whole other pickle I'll get into in a second. You have random battles, so there's that kind of nostalgia punch in the face there. I say punch in the face because in my humble opinion, they happen way too frequently, about every 13 to 15 steps. And that might seem okay, but trust me, it's really not. It's actually really frustrating. Probably my biggest gripe with World of Final Fantasy is the fact that the random battles occur way too often. And it's weird because in the beginning of the game, I actually thought they happened way too infrequently. And I'm like, hey, I want to grind, I want to level up. I can't do this when you have a fight every 30 seconds. But then I think as the game has gone on, it's all right, you're tougher now. We're going to make these small dungeons really long and drawn out because we're going to make you fight every 13 steps. And it's it's very irritating. It's very irritating. But okay, I got that out of the way. Now we can move on from that. Obviously, the most Final Fantasy-y thing about World of Final Fantasy are the characters you meet. World of Final Fantasy is littered, and I mean littered in a good way. Probably should have used a different word, but it's full of NPCs from prior Final Fantasy games. You're going to come across all of your fan favorites. I won't say who, just because I found that one of the joys for me in playing this game is to be surprised, because you never know who you're going to run into. Something that World of Final Fantasy does is that they'll take a character that you know to be... Basically, you never know where you're going to find a character. They're not going to stick to their original storyline. I mean, they will in a sense, but you never know what occurrence you're going to be in, and then find your people. Okay, let's see. So these characters, they're very fun. I mean, everything's all voice acted, so it's cool to hear them talking, and I think all the voice acting is really well done. But don't expect to spend a lot of time with these characters. They make very important cameos, and they are just kind of there to get the warm and fuzzies churning and then move along the story, and then they peace out, and then you don't really see them again, in the sense of within... Okay, I don't want to say anymore. Also, just a heads up that, again, I have not finished the game, so maybe toward the end of the game there's a huge like orgy of Final Fantasy characters and you all get to do a quest together. I don't know, I haven't finished the game. So just have that expectation going in. However, there are things called intervention quests, and you will unlock these as you encounter new characters. And what they allow you to do is you will walk up to someone and they'll be like, hey, and you'll be like, sup, and they'll open up this big list of quests. Think of them as kind of mini side quests. And each one involves a character that you have interacted with, and you actually have to pay with a form of currency, in-game currency, don't worry, to unlock and experience these. They're, from the ones I've played, they're separate from the story. I mean, they take place in the same universe, but they are separate from Rain and Lan's adventure. It's kind of like them doing their own thing, living their own life, bettering the world in their own way. And you get to watch them do that for like maybe 5-minute cutscenes. And then there's a battle at the end, and then you get goodies, and that's kind of how they all work. Just a few more things to touch on before I tackle the beast that is combat in this game. The graphics and the game in general is just beautiful. The facial animations are really well done. It's definitely a very, very good looking game. I played on PlayStation 4. So just, yeah, like appreciate the eye sex, because there's a lot of eye sex. Okay, that got weird. My battery just died, so hopefully like the background isn't too unaligned, misaligned. Whatever. Hopefully it's not too different than what you're accustomed to. The writing in World of Final Fantasy is really cute, it's quirky, it's witty. There have been many times where I have laughed out loud to myself, by myself, alone in my house, and enjoyed a good chuckle, a good knee slapper. I think part of the humor comes from the fact that Rain and Lan are essentially, if you've never played a Final Fantasy game before, you are Rain and you are Lan. You are thrown into this world and you don't know really what's going on. You don't know what the most staple things of Final Fantasy are. You will come across never mind. I'm not going to spoil anything. So it's fun to see them experience it. One thing, okay, it's a double-edged sword. That's the saying, right? So Rain and Lan they're twins, so they have a very close relationship, and they banter a lot back and forth. And you do have a third companion that is with you basically at all times, and that person or thing chips in a lot, and that's always fun and entertaining to watch, because Lan is kind of the stereotypical stupid character with a good heart who, you know, oblivious, and things fly right over his head. He doesn't know how to pronounce things. He doesn't know what words mean, so he's always making a blubbering fool of himself. And Rain is the very like smart, attentive, head on her shoulders. But what she does is she criticizes Lan a lot, and she always makes fun of him, and Lan is always the butt of every joke. And so yeah, sometimes some of that stuff is really funny, and it's like ha 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 ha. But when I'm 30 hours into it and it's starting to get a little annoying, I'm kind of like in my head thinking like, okay, Lan, mature, have that pivotal character moment, whatever it is, so you stop saying such stupid shit. Does that make sense? I mean, it's not terrible. It's just like, okay, I'm ready for you to have more than one side to you. And there are points within the story where some shit goes down and he's like, oh, and he steps up to the plate and you're like, that's awesome, like that's great. And then things are okay, and then he just kind of regresses to being a dummy again. All right, let's tackle the elephant in the room. That made no sense. So combat is, okay, so combat at the core of it is Final Fantasy-like, in the sense that you have an action time bar, and you know, that goes, and you can have weight, you can have semi-weight, you can have active at all times, so it just depends on how you want to play the game. So if you played an older Final Fantasy game before, you know exactly what to expect. Those of you who are new to the series, you'll get it, no problem. So combat, again, so how it differs this time is that there are things called Mirages, and I hate to make this reference, but I have to. It's very much like Pokemon in this, and I'm sure you've heard that already. It's in the sense that you will go to new areas and new dungeons, and there will be new Mirages, think of them as Pokemon, for you to catch and imprison, and it's called Imprison. And once you do that, you can use them to fight with you in battle, and each Mirage comes with its own set of skills and abilities, and resistance is, yeah, so easy, right? Obviously, it sounds really simple on paper, but it does create a very complex fighting system depending on how intricate and how detailed you want to get with it. So a few more details about the Mirages is they come in different sizes, small, medium, and large. So what you can do with these Mirages is create a stack. Now I haven't mentioned this, but Rain and Lan are, when they're in their normal sized forms. They are technically called giants with a J according to the lore of the game that they're in. Now, I'm sure you've seen the cute little like chibi little characters. Those are called lillikins. So when Rain and Lawn are the normal sized giant form, they are a large character, which means that you can use a medium sized Mirage and a small sized Mirage to stack on top of you, and then you kind of become like this powerhouse. All of your stats become combined. You share strengths, you share weaknesses, and it's a really good way to tank. On the flip side, if you like to play as a chibi little lillikin, then you are a medium-sized character, and then you get to sit on top of a large Mirage and then have a small Mirage on top of your head. So you're essentially the filling of a sandwich. But anyway, same sorts of things apply. All your stats are combined, all that kind of good stuff. So the only real difference between using the lillikin form for combat versus the giant form for combat depends on what kind of Mirages you have. If you have a large-shaped Mirage that has fire resistance, and that's what you really need for an upcoming battle, then you're going to have to play as a lillikin so you can use that guy in battle. Because you cannot have two larges in battle, so you cannot be a giant and have a super large Mirage with you. Does that make sense? I hope I'm doing a good job at this. So yes, you can stack. You do not have to stack, however. If you unstack all of your characters, so now you have a small, a medium, and a large as their own separate entity on the playing field, what this means is that your stats are no longer combined and that each little character, two Mirages in the character all have their own stats. So this can be helpful. Let's think of if you are fighting an enemy who uses the death ability a lot. Instant KO. It sucks. We've all had our rage moments with that goddamn ability. Anyway, if you are a stack and that enemy cast KO or death on you, it'll kill your whole party. You guys are all dead. No one survived. But if you unstack and you're all separately on the battlefield and the enemy casts death, then only one of your characters will peace out, Boy Scout, and then you still have two remaining. Does that make sense? Okay. So Mirages level up just like Rain and Lawn, and how that works is that you have your Mirages with you in battle. You can have up to two. You can have none if you don't want any. You probably won't do very well. But anyway, those Mirages get their fair share of the XP. Mirages that you have on your body but you didn't actually use get 8% of the XP. In the Mirages that you don't have room for, you can only carry a limited amount on you at a time. They go to like a prism case, or if you're like a Pokemon fan, they go to Professor Oak. It's kind of, or the PC. It's kind of great like that. Anyway, point being is that these guys do level up, and when they level up, you get skill points, and then you go into what's called the Mirage board, and inside the Mirage board are little spheres, and it's a grid, and you can choose what abilities you want them to learn. It's all pretty straightforward stuff. I mean, there is a learning curve to it, and it took me maybe like 3 hours before I really like got it, before it all clicked. And I'm like, oh, and then I was switching out Mirages, and then I was like tweaking their abilities, and I was doing this and doing that, and it was, it's fun. I think the tricky part though is convincing people to capture the new Mirages and actually use them. I mean, if you're a collector, then then you're just gonna want them all and I'll talk about actually catching the Mirages in a second. But for me, what I have found that I've started to do is, because I'm 30 hours into this, and it's fun, but it's lost almost its sense of luster, and luster is that one. Anyway, it's not as shiny as it used to be. So I find that I'll just collect them, and then I'll send them away, or maybe I won't even try to collect them. If I can't collect them at the moment, I won't come back for them. And so now I just have my main characters and like my beefy ass Mirages, which works out most of the time. The parts that when it doesn't work out is when you're like in a boss fight and all of your Mirages are fire type, and unfortunately that's the weakness to the boss, or the boss's attacks are super effective against you. You know what I'm trying to say. So in that sense, you do have a reason to switch out your Mirages and make sure that you're building them up as you go, because otherwise you're going to find yourself in a pickle when you're like, wow, I need ice Mirages, but all I have are fire Mirages, and then you're just screwed, and then you have to grind a little bit. You also need different Mirages for different things. For example, if you are exploring a dungeon, you'll come across like a big boulder, and you have to have a Mirage that has like Earth Smash or something, and its ability that Mirage can learn in the Mirage board. And if you don't have that, you can't get past that, and you can't get that treasure chest. And there's some good stuff in those treasure chests. So there are little things like that. Or you'll come across a switch, and the switch, in order to press it down, it needs 3 different Mirages that have a combined water resistance of 100, but they all have to weigh over 5 pounds. So you are enticed in that sort of regard to collect as many as you can just for the diversity alone. To catch Mirages, you have to perform certain criteria. Some of the criteria is really easy and straightforward, as like, hey, just inflict damage and then you can catch this guy. Until you meet the criteria, you cannot catch them. So yeah, like I said, sometimes inflict damage, you're good to go. Sometimes it's inflict blindness. Sometimes it's cast a fire spell. So while you can buy items that give Rain and Lawn the ability to do that, and you can equip things called Mirages, which are essentially abilities that you can get as well. Most of the time, it's much more convenient just to have your Mirage do it, because then you don't run low on resources and all that kind of crap. So that's kind of another reason why you want to have as many Mirages as possible, because you never know what status ailment you have to inflict to catch another one. Yeah. Well, I feel like I just talked for like 100 minutes about Mirages. Hopefully it wasn't too painful, and hopefully it gave you an idea of what the hell you're gonna come across in World of Final Fantasy. But all in all, it is a fun system, and it's nice to experience something new. That's so much different than like the typical straightforward turn-based action time bar hack and slash RPG. The last thing I want to say about World of Final Fantasy was that I went into this game expecting like a childish, easy peasy JRPG for beginners that's marketed toward children. And maybe that was my misinterpretations of Square Enix's marketing, or maybe I was just wrongly assuming things, or I didn't do my proper research. Probably the case. Either way, nay, World of Final Fantasy, while it is a much simpler RPG in the sense that, you know, you don't have the sprawling towns, you don't have the open world map, you don't have like several characters in your group all at once that banter among themselves. You generally only have Rain and Lawn with you at all times. But there is a really good story there, and the combat is unique and it is fun, and there is something addicting about catching Mirages and learning about their abilities and messing with the stacks and all that good stuff. So there is a lot of depth to this game. I still am not totally sure where the story is going, and I'm 30 hours into it, so I have a feeling that there's a lot more meat and girth left to World of Final Fantasy. So yes, I would definitely recommend World of Final Fantasy. Again, I have not finished the game, but I have spent 30 hours with it, so I feel like unless something huge happens and the whole like gameplay is completely overhauled and everyone comes down and we all have a big Final Fantasy character orgy, I don't really expect like anything too drastic to happen at this point in terms of gameplay. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions and I will happily answer them in the comments below. Bye!